Welcome to the Midnight Mind. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and give this video a like. I'd really appreciate it. It's midnight, and that means one thing. It's time to enter the mind of Carl Jung. Have you ever tried to think your way out of heartbreak? You told yourself you were fine. You analysed what went wrong, listed every reason it ended, dissected the psychology of attachment, and still the ache remained. A quiet, endless echo beneath your thoughts. You tried to be rational, but every insight dissolved when night fell and you remembered their voice. The truth is, no amount of logic can outthink the wound of loss. The heart bleeds in a language the mind cannot translate. We live in an age of analysis, where self-awareness is supposed to be salvation. You can quote philosophers, read books on attachment theory, understand trauma responses, and yet still wake up haunted by the same person you thought you'd outgrown. Heartbreak reveals the limits of intellect. It humbles even the strongest ego, and as Pascal wrote centuries ago, the heart has its reasons, which reason knows nothing of. He wasn't being sentimental, he was describing a fundamental law of the human condition, that thought cannot conquer feeling. Pascal saw the heart not as emotion, but as intuition, the deep centre of being that feels truth before the mind can articulate it. He believed we mistake rational mastery for wisdom. We assume that if we can explain our suffering, we can escape it. But heartbreak exposes the illusion. You can describe every reason why someone left, yet still ache for them in ways that make no logical sense. Your suffering persists not because you lack understanding, but because understanding is powerless where the heart is sovereign. In the ruins of heartbreak, your thoughts become both weapon and prison. You replay memories, question every word, and search for a pattern to make pain coherent. But love is not an equation. It's a force that defies order. The more you try to categorize it, the more it escapes you. And in that restless pursuit of meaning, you become what Nietzsche called the sick animal who seeks reason as a sedative. He saw thinking not as pure truth-seeking, but as a defense mechanism, a way to avoid the terror of raw feeling. Heartbreak is the collapse of control. It's the moment the intellect meets its mirror and realizes how little power it has over desire. You can't command love to stop any more than you can order a storm to end. The body remembers what the mind denies. The smell, the tone, the rhythm of another presence becomes etched into your nervous system. Jung wrote that when something is lost, the psyche reclaims it through dreams and symbols, because the unconscious refuses to let go of what consciousness rejects. So you start dreaming of them. You see their face in strangers. You hear their laugh in the static between songs. It's not madness, it's memory seeking wholeness. Jung believed the soul has its own gravity, that unprocessed emotion sinks into the unconscious and waits. What you call obsession is often an unanswered question within yourself. The person who broke you becomes the image through which your own shadow speaks. You're not just missing them, you're being summoned to confront the parts of you that were never whole to begin with. This is why heartbreak feels both sacred and violent. It destroys the illusion of autonomy. You realize how much of yourself was built around someone else's presence. And when they leave, what collapses is not only love, but identity. Nietzsche warned that every deep attachment risks the death of the self, because love demands the dissolution of boundaries. When that union fractures, the self you had borrowed from another disintegrates. What remains is the raw void where a person once fit. We often mistake heartbreak for a failure of love, but it's also an encounter with reality. The mind that once felt infinite meets its own limitation. You can rationalize the loss endlessly, but meaning doesn't dissolve pain. It only explains it. The wound remains because it's older than the story. It belongs to something primal, the fear of being unseen, unwanted, unanchored. The loss triggers not just the end of a relationship, but the ancient terror of isolation buried within every soul. That's why logic feels so useless here. You can't argue your way out of abandonment. You can't reason with the void. The intellect is like a lantern in a storm. It offers light, but the wind still howls. Pascal, Jung, and Nietzsche each understood in their own way that the intellect must eventually bow to something deeper. The mind seeks to control life, but the heart experiences it. The first step towards healing, then, is surrender. Not as defeat, but as recognition that the heart speaks in symbols, not syllogisms. If you've ever tried to silence pain with understanding, you've already felt the futility of intellect. Heartbreak is not a puzzle to solve, but a descent to survive. It's an initiation into the irrational truth that the soul cannot be managed by reason. You must feel to transcend. The mind observes, but it does not transform. Only when you stop trying to escape the feeling, when you allow it to burn through you without explanation, does something begin to shift. Every heartbreak in that sense is an invitation, a call to confront the truth of yourself without the armor of intellect. You're not broken because you feel too deeply. You suffer because you've been taught to believe that feeling is weakness. But the heart knows what the mind refuses to admit, that loss is not an error in the system. It's part of what makes you human. Pascal would say it is through the wound that grace enters. Jung would call it the path of individuation. Nietzsche would call it the crucible of becoming. The mind wants closure. The soul wants transformation. One ends the story, the other begins it. Heartbreak is not simply the loss of another person, it's the collapse of a structure inside you. The mind doesn't grieve the person, it grieves the meaning that person gave to your existence. Every relationship becomes a mirror, reflecting who we believe ourselves to be. When the mirror shatters, the image we loved goes with it. That's why heartbreak feels like death. Something in you has died. And the intellect, terrified of this realization, begins its desperate work. Analysis, justification, denial. The mind becomes both mourner and manipulator. Jung wrote that most neuroses arise from the refusal to suffer consciously. The mind will do anything to avoid pain, even if it means repeating it. So, instead of feeling grief directly, we analyze it. We build theories about what went wrong, about attachment styles and psychological compatibility. We write long messages we never send, as if clarity could erase emotion. But pain doesn't yield to explanation. It demands participation. Until the heart is allowed to ache fully, it cannot release what it holds. The intellect can only circle the wound, never enter it. The danger is that thought becomes a form of resistance. Each rationalization is an act of control, a way to assert dominance over what can't be dominated. Nietzsche understood this impulse well. He saw human reason as a will to power. The mind's attempt to tame chaos, to make sense of the unbearable. When love dies, the mind rages against its helplessness. It crafts narratives to regain mastery. They were never right for me. It wasn't real love. I'm better off. These thoughts may comfort, but they also conceal the truth, that you're still bound by what you cannot control. Every unhealed heartbreak becomes a ghost that haunts your next move. You meet new people, but see only fragments of the past in their faces. You interpret kindness as danger, silence as rejection. The wound distorts perception. Jung called this projection, when the inner world spills outward, painting others with colours that belong to your own soul. You don't fall for people as they are, you fall for the image your unconscious attaches to them. That's why heartbreak lingers. You're not mourning a person, you're mourning the collapse of a psychic illusion. In heartbreak, projection reverses. The image that once appeared divine now becomes demonic. The same person who once seemed to complete you now embodies your rejection, your inadequacy, your fear of being unseen. Nietzsche might say the idol becomes the enemy. Love, when idealized, always carries its shadow. The one we adored becomes the vessel for all we refuse to face in ourselves. The hatred that follows heartbreak is often just love turned inward, poisoned by humiliation. The same energy that once idealized now condemns, because it cannot bear its own reflection. The intellect feeds this cycle. It hunts for answers where there are none. It revisits conversations like sacred texts, looking for hidden meaning. It creates theories of blame to avoid the simplicity of grief. But beneath every analysis is the same silent truth. You wanted to be loved completely, and you were not. That is the real wound. Not their betrayal, not their absence, but the confrontation with the reality that no one can fulfill the infinite hunger of the soul. As Pascal warned, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. We seek others to escape that solitude. Heartbreak exposes the lie. It forces us back into the silence we fled. And in that silence, the mind panics. It races to fill the void with thought, memory, noise, anything but stillness. But stillness is exactly what the heart demands. Jung saw this moment as the beginning of individuation, the process by which the self withdraws its projections and reclaims what it once gave away. Every heartbreak, then, is an initiation into wholeness. If you have the courage to stop thinking and start listening to what the pain is trying to teach you. But few people do. Most run back into distraction, new relationships, endless scrolling, the mechanical comfort of work. The pain becomes background static, familiar but ignored. Nietzsche called this the great anesthetic of modern life, the attempt to escape suffering through constant activity. Yet he also warned that suppression has a cost. What's buried alive within you doesn't die, it festers. The repressed emotion becomes cynicism, detachment, or compulsive desire. You stop loving not because love betrayed you, but because you fear feeling again. The mind, having failed to control the heart, now tries to silence it. In this state, the intellect becomes tyrant. It reduces emotion to pathology, love to chemical reaction, heartbreak to malfunction. It demands logic where mystery reigns. But the human soul is not a machine to be repaired. It's a labyrinth, and heartbreak is the thread that guides you deeper inside. Pascal would remind us that the heart's reasons are not irrational, they are supra-rational. They operate on a level where meaning is felt, not deduced. When you deny that realm, you live as half a being. The paradox is that the same intelligence that builds civilizations cannot mend a broken heart. The brain can calculate infinity, but cannot comprehend longing. The more you think about loss, the further you drift from healing. Thinking isolates, feeling connects. Jung often said that healing requires the union of opposites, the reconciliation of head and heart, light and shadow. To think without feeling is sterile. To feel without thought is chaos. The alchemy of heartbreak lies in their integration. To understand without fleeing, and to feel without drowning. So when you catch yourself analysing the past, remember what your mind is trying to do. It's protecting you from powerlessness. It fears the surrender that grief requires. But as Nietzsche wrote, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. The chaos of heartbreak is creative. It tears down the false idols of certainty, pride, and ego. It leaves you exposed, raw, and painfully alive. Heartbreak is the crucible of the soul. It burns away illusions until only truth remains. What you thought was the end is in fact the beginning. The collapse of who you were so something greater can emerge. You can't think your way through this fire. You must walk through it, unguarded. The intellect can describe the flames, but only the heart can endure them. When Pascal spoke of the heart's reasons, he meant this sacred irrationality, the capacity to feel what reason cannot justify and still find meaning within it. To heal from heartbreak is not to erase the past, but to integrate it. Jung called this process individuation, the union of conscious and unconscious, thought and emotion, or light and shadow.
Every person you love awakens a part of you you've forgotten. When they leave, that part remains, demanding recognition. The love you projected outward must now be reclaimed inward. This is not selfishness, it's reclamation. The energy that once reached for another becomes the fuel for becoming whole. Through heartbreak, the self learns to return to itself. The mind resists this transformation because it craves certainty. It wants resolution, not rebirth. But heartbreak refuses closure. It dismantles every easy narrative until you're forced to face yourself without disguise. This is what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of becoming who you are. To become is to accept the death of old identities. The lover, the beloved, the victim, the saviour, and to rise beyond them. The will to power begins not in domination, but in self-overcoming. You stop seeking control and start cultivating strength. The pain remains, but it becomes luminous. You may notice this shift quietly. One day, the name that once shattered you feels distant, almost tender. The memories no longer wound, they instruct. The ache becomes part of your language, not your prison. This is not forgetting, it's integration. The love you gave does not vanish, it becomes character. The heart, once broken, now carries depth. Pascal believed that suffering reveals our dependence on something higher, not necessarily God, but the dimension of being that transcends intellect. When you surrender to heartbreak, you don't lose yourself. You fall through the surface of your own mind and touch the infinite. But make no mistake, surrender is not passivity. It's the most demanding act of will. To face pain without resistance requires courage that thought alone cannot provide. The mind calculates risks, the heart endures them. Jung would say that this is the hero's path, descending into the unconscious to retrieve what was lost. Each tear becomes an initiation. Each night of longing, a lesson in depth. You're being sculpted by something ancient within you, something that values truth over comfort. The wound becomes your teacher, and its lesson is humility. From that humility comes clarity. You begin to see that what you loved in another was never entirely them. It was your own capacity to love reflected back. The object may vanish, but the source remains. That realization is freedom. It dissolves resentment, envy, and self-pity. You stop asking why they left and begin to ask what within you was awakened by their presence. Nietzsche called this amor fati, the love of fate. To love even your suffering because it forms the shape of your becoming. The pain you resisted becomes the ground of your strength. And strength in this sense is not hardness, it's depth. The shallow person heals by distraction. The wise person heals by descent. They let sorrow carve through them until it reaches wisdom. This is why heartbreak often produces artists, philosophers, mystics. Suffering cracks the surface, and through that fracture, something divine breathes. Pascal might call it grace. Jung would call it individuation. Nietzsche would call it affirmation, the moment when you say yes to life, even when it wounds you. Each is a different name for the same truth: transformation through acceptance. The paradox of heartbreak is that it exposes both your fragility and your power. You realize how easily you can break, yet also how endlessly you can rebuild. The mind cannot comprehend this resilience because it doesn't come from logic. It comes from the same mysterious force that keeps the heart beating after it's been shattered. The will to live, to love again, to risk pain in pursuit of connection. You're not meant to escape heartbreak. You're meant to evolve through it. To feel deeply is not weakness. It is participation in the full intensity of existence. So when your mind begins to spiral again, when you replay old memories or search for meaning in the silence, pause. Let the heart speak in its own language. Sit with the ache, not as a problem to solve, but as a presence to understand. Notice what it's revealing about your attachments, your fears, your unhealed wounds. Jung wrote that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Heartbreak is that darkness. It asks you to stop fleeing and to finally see. And in that seeing, you begin to return. Slowly, without realizing it, the mind and the heart begin to reconcile. The intellect learns humility. The heart gains wisdom. You no longer need to overthink your pain because you've learned to feel it without being consumed. This is mastery. Not the domination of emotion, but harmony with it. The same mind that once tried to escape the heart now learns to serve it. Thought becomes devotion, and feeling becomes understanding. The division that caused suffering dissolves into wholeness. Heartbreak, then, is not the enemy of reason. It's its purification. It burns away arrogance until thought becomes compassionate. It breaks illusion until love becomes real. It shows you that intellect without heart is blindness, and heart without intellect is chaos. The task is not to choose one over the other, but to let both mature through suffering. The one who can think deeply and feel deeply is free. For they have learned that wisdom is not found in analysis, but in acceptance, not in escape, but in surrender. And so, as you stand in the ashes of what was, remember this: your mind will always seek to explain, but your soul seeks to experience. Let the experience have its way with you. Let it teach you what no philosophy, no theory, no thought ever could. That love, even when it breaks you, is the force through which you become real. The heart has its reasons, and perhaps its greatest reason is this: only through loss do we remember how to feel, and only through feeling do we remember who we are. The mind will try to understand, but the heart already knows. Only then, in that vulnerable silence beyond thought, does something new begin to form. Not an answer, but awareness. Every heartbreak is a reckoning between the part of you that wants control and the part that longs for surrender. The mind clings to patterns. The heart seeks truth. The more you fight to explain love, the more you distance yourself from its essence. Love is not meant to be solved. It is meant to be lived, lost, and learned from. When you stop trying to outthink heartbreak and instead let it undo you, you discover that the mind's failure is the soul's awakening. The intellect breaks so that something deeper can finally see.
If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button for me. I really would appreciate it. And if you have any thoughts on today's episode, I'd love to hear them. Leave me a message down in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.